Welcome to What in the World, a project initiated by Hungry for Life International. Today's podcast is titled Clashes of Culture, and Jess will be interviewing Jackie Orantes. So grab your headphones, sit back, relax, and listen as they talk about bringing awareness to working in different cultural contexts.
All right, hi, and welcome to another Monday, because that's when we release these, of the What in the World podcast from Hungry for Life. It's where we talk about all things with global missions. And so here today, it's exciting because we have an ex-staff member. Ex, that sounds so harsh, Jackie. Yeah. But we're tackling the topic of cross-cultural interactions and awareness. And this is obviously a topic that we at HFL have always been mindful of to prep teams back when we had teams to go on before they head to a country. And we always make handbooks debriefing team members of do's and don'ts in a particular country, basics in language, etc. So this is something that we like to pay attention to here at Hungry for Life. And yeah, it's something that we've always paid attention to internationally, but as of late, I feel like this topic can be very much crossed over to home. Locally.
I think it's always been a home issue, but we've put more attention on it because of recent events of the last couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like whether or not you're traveling anywhere, whether or not you're going on a missions trip or you're just, going around town, you can learn something from this one. So welcome, Jackie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for driving all the way out here.
Yeah.
Chilliwack's faraway land.
Through rainstorms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I did learn something about your commute.
Mm-hmm.
Jackie came from Surrey?
No, I came from New West.
New West, but made a stop at Davis Meats. So Davis Meats, you can sponsor this if you want, because apparently they have the best bacon.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. They sell out all the time. So I always call ahead and make sure they have it.
Too funny.
Right?
Well, there you go. I provided you an excuse to get more bacon. Okay, so yeah, as I mentioned, Jackie is our guest speaker, and she has a master's in leadership, and she has written a fantastic resource that we are now adapting to use. I hope that's okay.
I left it here on purpose.
Yeah. On understanding cultures. She's actually a nurse currently. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I work as a nurse, yes.
You work as a nurse at Royal Columbian in the ER. So say hello.
Yeah.
And her job here used to be project managing.
Yes.
And so you've had a lot of cross-cultural interactions with your partners.
Actually, when I started, I was like, they didn't have the position of MFC, so I was actually MFC / project manager.
Oh, so you got to deal with
both sides of the equation.
That's a lot.
It was a lot.
And that's a lot to mediate between
In some ways, it was easier because you could just deal with it in your own self.
Yes.
Less emails.
Yeah, true. So, as I mentioned, you are currently working as a nurse.
Yes.
And I want to talk about your cross-cultural experience for a little bit here. Where have you been? That might be a loaded question because you've been a lot of places. Where have you been and what have you done?
Well, I kind of had to break it into two groups. So I've been to 17 countries plus 3 or 4 for like stopovers, so I can't really count them, even though my toes were there.
I mean, you can get cross-cultural experiences in airports.
True. Okay.
I'm just kidding.
All right. So then it bumps it up to 20.
Nice.
I have gone on vacation to a bunch of countries, and then
She's counting.
I've worked and lived in 8.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Which countries? Can you list all 8?
Sure, yeah. So I have spent significant time in Mexico and Sri Lanka. I have lived in Nigeria and Russia. And I have visited / led teams to China, Kenya, Uganda, Haiti, and Guatemala.
What?
Yeah.
We worked very closely for years, and I didn't know that about you. Wow.
Keep it on the DL.
That's a lot of places to have lived / submersed yourself in.
Yeah, it's been good.
Nice. So, why do you think paying attention to cross-cultural interactions is important? I feel like an obvious answer, but
I feel like every time you walk outside of your door, you are experiencing new cultures. So even, I would call them, I'm going to coin a phrase, I don't know if it's out there already, but microculture, you've heard it here first, folks, is your family. So like your family of origin has a culture, how you do Christmas, how you do vacations, how you live is your culture. That becomes very evident when two people get married. They have a cross-cultural clash.
that's what that's called.
Yeah, we'll just call it that. It sounds way more professional.
We're just having a cross-cultural clash, not a fight.
No. And then it's like macro as well, like country specific, or like you can go the Americas, Western culture, Eastern culture. Like you can go as big as that. So I think in our current country where we live, we have so many different cultures, global cultures as well as just family cultures that live here and do things differently. And so being aware that everybody's got a different take on the world is a good way to get started in learning and experiencing the culture.
And it's easy to stay in your microculture,
especially during COVID.
Totally. I wonder how many more little microcultures are going to emerge after this. But we live in a very ethnically diverse country, and even BC, the Lower Mainland, like there's a wealth of culture around us. Yep. But it's so easy to get stuck in your family, in your microculture. Because you don't need to really. But as of late, lots of things have come up in the news and it's brought to light that maybe we need to get out of that a little bit, even just at home.
Sure.
So, since writing, like I kind of just mentioned, since writing your guide, lots has gone down locally. How can we be more culturally, what are some things we can do here just to be more culturally sensitive to our neighbors? Like, I mean, you wrote a whole guide that's geared towards international culture awareness, but what from that is like a really good crossover?
I would say that there's a couple of things to pull from it. Most significantly, recognizing your own culture and how that impacts. When I started writing that, I was tasked with writing a guide for international people working with Westerners.
Oh,
and
okay.
As I started doing more and more research, I realized that it's actually not that way. If we are choosing to leave our own culture and interact with another culture, we need to be the ones that are prepared. And so when we think about, like, we can just name them, I'm guessing, the First Nations situation, the Black Lives Matter thing. I'm not going to get political, but I'm just saying a way to approach that would be to learn, recognize the history that goes into those events, those experiences of everybody, and recognize them as valid, I think, is probably one of the most important things. And then recognize what you bring to the table. And I use the example of sunglasses, and I think it's really kind of a great way because sunglasses frame your vision, so you can only see what's in front of you in those lenses.
Right, yeah.
You see through your experiences, your culture, your ideas and your thoughts are those lenses. And if you make a conscious effort to pull off your sunglasses and look around a little bit without those lenses, you can often see a lot of similarities with people that you hadn't seen before and experience things in different ways. And then you can also recognize and appreciate the differences. And I think sometimes we forget to do that.
Well, I think it's also unpopular sometimes to do that because we all belong to our groups, so to say. Yeah. And I've even experienced this sometimes in my own family where I just question something and everyone kind of maybe turns their head sideways like, well, why would you question that? Yeah. Like this is the way it's done and this is why those people are the way they are. Yeah. And then just move on. Yeah. And like even with the First Nations news that's come out lately, like trying to understand what went on. Like there's so much like backstory and noise about that kind of of like, why is it coming out now and that kind of stuff. But look at, like, I don't want to get too political either here, but the stereotypes that they have.
Yeah.
And, well, why alcoholism, for example? Wouldn't you try to escape if that was all done to you? And it's just like, at the heart of it all, we're all human. We all deserve compassion and love. But when we get in, put our sunglasses on, it's sometimes hard to take them off, or you don't want to because it might be too bright.
Well, and the sunglasses kind of reinforce your us and them.
Yeah.
Because everybody inside your sunglass view that you connect with is your us, and then everybody else is them. And it's easy to disconnect your care and your idea of compassion when it's them.
Yeah.
But when it's us, I think it makes it a little bit more personal, and it holds it a little tighter.
For sure. Do you have a good example of that? Have you had like a good story in your cross-cultural experiences where you had your sunglasses on, somebody else may have had their sunglasses on, and like all failed?
Well, I have some very painful ones, and I'm not gonna bring us down with those. But I'll bring you a silly story.
Okay.
Which kind of really highlights it. So in stereotypical Western culture, we appreciate being thin. We appreciate that, when we lose weight and we're going on diets and blah, 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 right? So I moved to a country and I lost a significant amount of weight living there because I didn't have access to ice cream and butter and nacho chips and cheese.
Tragic.
Let me tell you, I was suffering for the Lord. Anyways, I lost a significant amount of weight, and everybody was freaking out there because they thought that I was going to go home and everybody was going to think that they weren't taking good care of me and that they would never let me back. Like my family would never let me back. Meanwhile, I'm like, hallelujah, somebody taking those pictures with the pants. I felt so like funny. A Weight Watchers commercial. Anyways, then I came home for a period of time and went back, and they got super excited. They were like, Auntie Jackie, you have added. And I was like,
oh, Dick.
Yeah, I've gained some weight.
That's how they say it. You have added.
You have added.
Yeah, I like that.
But they were so happy and excited because in their culture, when you are heavier, it means A, you're not working, B, you have money, and C, you have access to food.
Right.
And so when I was losing weight, it was painful for them because they thought that I would go home and tell the people horror stories about not having access to food and that I was too poor and all that kind of stuff.
Funny.
Yeah.
We need to adapt that culture here. Yeah. Anyways, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, and you have a few in your resource guide too. And I was like, oh, those are great, but maybe those are the ones you don't want to touch on.
You got to read the book.
Yeah.
Guide. It's not really a book.
Well, I'll put this in there. You're not going to read it unless you go on an HFL trip. I'm just kidding. It's yours. You can do whatever you want with it. But okay, we talk about like hot and cold cultures. Do you want to explain to our viewers or listeners what is a hot and cold culture?
I mean, it's probably most simply you can divide it by saying a hot country is a place where it's hot and a cold country is a place where it's not. And it just kind of is a way of separating cultures in the macro sense of this culture, like for example, a hot culture tends to appreciate like event experiences to time, where cold cultures tend to experience time like down to the 5:15, half an hour, minute sort of breakdowns, where instead of like, okay, so today's somebody's birthday party, we're going to celebrate that person today.
Nice.
Whereas we would kind of approach it like, okay, the bus is coming at 9:00.
Right.
And we're going to all be ready, and we're going to have our lunches packed, and we're going to have everything sorted out, and we're going to be lined up. And if it's not here at 9:05, that must mean there's a problem. So that's kind of like
we
a
are
way
icy cold here. Yeah.
We're so cold. Yeah.
Maybe not icy cold, but we're cold.
Yeah, it's funny. It's one of the things that you can tell people before they travel this idea, and they'll joke about island time and like all that kind of stuff. But until they actually experience, the fact that it's normal and nobody's ruffling a feather when the bus is 2 hours late, it's a whole different experience.
Oh, totally. Like I don't have a ton of cross-culture experience other than 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there kind of thing, right? But that one was a hard one for me. Like leading teams is
managing their expectations.
You're managing their expectations, and you're also the schedule keeper. You have the ultimate guide to their 2 weeks, and they're relying on you because of their expectations. But you cannot rely on that bus to make it there. No. And my personality is icy cold. I have cold culture inside of me where I don't like to waste time. And so it feels very unproductive to do that. But that's like TIA. There's a reason we always say that. This is Africa. When the bus comes 2 hours late, or your meal comes 2 hours late. And it's something you can't really stress enough before you go, because you're going to hit that. Yeah. And you have to have patience and take your glasses off and chill.
And look around, and there's always going to be somebody to talk to. Immerse yourself a little deeper in the culture and the experience of those around you, and use that time to chat up the local people, learn from them about what's going on in the culture today.
Yeah. And that's just one example of this. Like here at HFL, we use Hofstede's.
Yeah.
You're
It's complicated.
It's complicated.
I have studied this and I still get messed up on that one. Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of a proper way to explain what Hofstede's is, but it's
a way of classifying cultures, and it does it very specifically. But they studied IBM professionals, so they tried to level the playing field by studying professional people in a computer field.
That's very specific.
Very specific. Okay. But they were able to, that's how they classified them.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly. But there's other ways, I like the hot and cold because it's a little simpler to understand.
Right.
If you want to get into it, Hofstede's is amazing. I also like Hildebrand. Hebert. He does a really good job of class. Yes.
Do you have the book here?
Hebert.
Can you hold it up in front of?
It's not this particular book, but it is this author.
For those who are watching, you can see what book she's talking about.
He does a really great job of breaking things down as well. Okay. And he uses the hot and cold idea, which is a little bit easier to grasp, even for people with master's degrees. Yeah.
What's another good example of hot and cold? There's I mean, not getting into Hofstede's too much, but there's masculinity, there's power index.
Power's an easy one to talk about. Yeah. Because we see that one a lot, actually. And it also comes along with identity. So power is power differential sort of idea. And in cold countries, we prefer everybody to be on an equal playing field. So we like to be able to walk into the CEO's office as an employee and just have a conversation, or our manager's office and just be like, hey, this is what's going on. In a hot culture, you would never be able to do that because there's a hierarchy, and it's a very specific step-by-step process to get where you want to go. And there are certain people that hold a lot of power. So government officials or people that we would interact with a lot would be like community leaders or pastors, hold a lot of power. And they are able to make decisions independent of doing field research with their people. So in those kind of cultures, the government works for themselves and the people kind of get what's left over.
Okay.
Whereas in our culture, we expect our government to work for us.
Right.
And so we feel like we have a lot more influence, or should have a lot more influence on the way things go. In other cultures, not so much. So when you're working cross-culturally, you really have to navigate that and have the ability to have a role that gives you enough power in that community.
Right.
I've worked in countries where I had no power, other than the fact that I was white and I came with an organization that equals, to make it really base, money.
Sure. Yeah.
But as a single female, I had zero power, zero authority, and zero influence in the culture. And so I had to find somebody, the times that it worked the best, I had somebody that was a culture bridge. So somebody from that culture who understood my culture, but we could work together to kind of not manipulate, but to work the system so that people understood and got the respect that they needed from the titles that they needed, and things were communicated in a way that made it understandable to everybody that was involved.
Right.
When I didn't have that culture bridge, you have to bring Uncle Dave along, and Uncle Dave has to have a conversation with people, and then things get sorted.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Can you think of any? Did you led a lot of teams, right?
I did. I don't know how many I led, but I understand that I've led a lot. Yeah.
So, in your experience leading our teams, I'm talking as if down the road, people going on teams are listening to this podcast.
Okay. Yeah.
What are some classic culture fails that you've seen our teams do? I mean, we do our best to prepare our teams before they go, so they're not looking like fools on the ground. But
yeah,
I threw you on the spot. You don't have to answer.
You did.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to out any of my teams. It's hard to prepare everybody, but some things that I've seen, it's just and to be fair, the teams have transitioned from a behavior to a different behavior, which means it's better. But like approaching people as if they don't understand your language is one of the things that's really hard to watch. And because of that, you make observations out loud to your team about what you're seeing, because you're still you're fresh in the country and you still got your North American glasses on and you're looking around going, what did I do?
Right.
And you start making observations because it's your way of processing,
right.
which is a fine thing to do, but you have to watch who's got ears around you.
Absolutely.
So that's one thing that I've noticed.
Speaking, sorry, I cut you off.
No, go.
I kind of had one of those moments for myself. So I'm outing myself here. Yeah. But the very first team I led, now I narrowed it down. But well, it's my own fault, because I remember we were in Kenya and we came across a very devastating situation, as you often do when you're on field, right? Like, it's a culture shock. There's a reason for that term.
Yeah.
And I started tearing up and getting emotional in front of locals. And I had one team member, okay, I'm the leader here. I had a team member elbow me, look at me. She said, now is not the time. And I totally respected her for saying that, because she was more culturally aware than I was. I was crying at their situation. That's their every day. Yeah. That's rude. Like, what if you had somebody come into your home and looked at your house and they started crying? Oh, I'm so sorry you live here. That'd be, right? Yeah. So stuff like that, I would have thought to not to hold back, because it's culturally insensitive. But you have to be aware of that kind of stuff too. You're offending them by saying that. Yeah. So just things like that. But
yeah, that's true.
I was very new. It was my very first. I've since learned, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that team member just nudged me and said, "Get your act together." Seriously.
Really?
She didn't say that exact thing, but it was like a nudge, and it was like,
if you were that person, please make a comment below. Let us know what you said.
I wonder if this person remembers. Anyways, so in your paper, you say researchers note we must have some status within a culture to effectively work within it. What does that mean?
Well, it's kind of like what we were just talking about.
Okay, yeah.
In many cultures that we work within, you are working within a paternalistic culture, which basically means men lead.
Yeah.
So women have less power. Also, you're walking into a situation where people don't know you from anywhere.
Yeah.
And you expect them to listen to you and pay attention to you and your ideas. I think quite quite clearly about a time when I was living in Russia, and I was sent there to go bring the nurses in rural, well, I mean, it was a pretty big city, but I was told, this was my task, to bring the nurses into the 21st century.
Whoa.
So I was young. I was probably, I was 25, and people were looking at me like, I've worked longer than you've been alive. Why should I listen to you?
Right.
I had no status in that culture. They didn't care what I had to say. Did I come from the Kremlin? Did I have power from Putin? No, they didn't care what I had to say. So I had no power, no status in that culture. Yeah. Thankfully, because that happened quite early, they shuffled me off to a different area, and I worked alongside other people and came up with another guide. Seems to be my thing for people experiencing heart catheterizations. Anyways, I mean, it just shows like in that situation, they didn't provide me with the power, the status that I needed to affect the changes that they thought they wanted. And so the nurses didn't listen to me. They didn't care what I had to say because I had no status and power.
Right. Good example. How can we as Westerners not exert an assumptive power over another culture? I feel like that's
a tough one.
I know.
Because I mean, as North Americans, we pride ourselves in problem solvers. We were the people that conquered the great unknown, vast world of North America. You know, like we fought off all the disease, and we fought off the wilderness and the bears, and you know, I won't go further. Anyways, we pride ourselves on that kind of behavior. At work, we're rewarded for being problem solvers. We get promoted, and because we come up with good solutions, or we come up with the best sales and all that kind of stuff. So I think we approach missions in that same way. As a stereotype, we approach it as like, how can I conquer this problem that these people obviously have? They live in poverty. How can I get them out of poverty? They don't have enough food to eat. How can I solve that problem? Right. Oh, these kids are walking around in rags. How can I solve that problem? Like we bring that as part of our glasses, and it's not a bad thing. It's just a thing that we have to be aware of. Because sometimes the problems we see aren't the problems that they see. For example, I worked in one situation where the people brought us in so that we could start a maternity clinic because they had mothers dying in childbirth, and they wanted a safe place for their community to deliver babies and a safe place for the babies to be treated so that they didn't die in childbirth. As Westerners, we came in with the wisdom that, well, you can't just start a maternity clinic. You have to we have to have other things in place before. Like, let's start a walk-in clinic and just get it out in the community so that they know what's going on. And then we'll build up to a maternity clinic once we can make this something that's sustainable. I mean, it makes sense, but it's not what they wanted. Right. And it ended up dissolving the relationship, because we weren't paying attention to what they wanted.
That's a really good point to sit and focus on for a minute. And a while back, we did a podcast with Will Krull about helping and hurting. And that's a hurting situation. You wanted to help, but you ended up hurting. Yeah. Because you didn't take the time to sit and talk and actively listen to what their needs were. Yeah. And I understand this Western mindset because I am Western, but how can we, let's not just give them a meal today. Let's figure out a way to, get a sustainable program going on here. Well, they're going to be long dead by then. Sometimes a meal is what they need today. And that's not a Western mindset. But you need to address their needs by listening to them and getting to know their culture. And kind of just spending time is really...
Which is what's really hard to do in a 2-week trip.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's why I appreciate what Hungry for Life does, and why I was a part of it for so long, is because they spend the time to listen and to dig into what's really going on ahead of time, instead of just showing up in some rando place and doing what feels good in the moment, but may not have any long-term benefits, because it's not what the people want.
Yeah, that's a tricky one for us to wrap our heads around, like us as a North American society. We're so focused or results driven, I should say.
Yes, we like to have the numbers. How many houses did you build? How many souls did you save?
Yeah. And actually those get the donor dollars, but
they get the donor dollars. I'm not going to, that's true. And those stories do come up, but sometimes it takes years.
But that's on one end. Like we always show our donors that, we show them the stats, but we also take the time to listen. We have a great projects department, which you helped build up. There are two different types of solutions I kind of want to talk about here, offer up and suggest to people right now. One is about addressing cultural differences abroad and addressing cultural differences here, which we kind of talked about already. But what are some steps on how people can prepare for a cross-cultural experience?
Well, if you read my book, I think there's lots of steps that we can take and lots of things that we can do. But I think if there's one thing that you hear, it's this concept of Shema. This is something that I've recently come across. Otherwise, I would have included it. Maybe I'll have to do a rewrite. Anyways, it's the idea is to listen. And this is something that the Israelites started doing in the time of Moses, and Jesus would have done it as a child. You rehearse this scripture twice a day to kind of refresh your memory and keep it in the forefront of your whole day. And it's from Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 through 5. And it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength." And then Jesus, when he was asked by I think it was the rich ruler guy. Yeah, Anyways, there was this time when he was asked what the greatest commandments were. Yeah. And Jesus said to love the Lord your God and to love your neighbor as yourself. And so this whole idea of Shema, which is loving God, if you come prepared to love God, no matter what happens, no matter where you go, no matter what kind of a lumpy mattress you have to sleep on.
Been there.
You're more likely to approach it with an idea of humility and just seeing Jesus everywhere you look. And then you love yourself. And you have to know within yourself that you're doing this because of your love for God, not because of you're trying to earn somebody's appreciation, or you're trying to earn your salvation, or you're trying to tick off your box of good deeds. Like, you have to love yourself enough to know that you're doing this wholeheartedly. This is part of who you are, which means that when you come home, you're active in your community. And it's not just something that people hear that you've done and they're like, really? You did that? It's part of who you are. And then you love others. And you love others not by like coming down to them, like coming down to them. Yeah. They are humans. Their same blood runs in their veins. They were created by God. And yes, they live in a different situation than you, but they're still God's children, and you are equal. You will stand beside yourself in front of Jesus to be judged. They will stand by themselves as well. And I think when you approach people as an equal, it changes how you approach your experience, whether it's here, dealing with whatever culture that you deal with, marriage to like international people, or whether it's whether it's, working overseas on a missions trip and you walk into a situation where you're feeling a little overwhelmed. It covers all of those things. So the one thing I would say is learn Shema and just practice it.
That's something, it's a new word for me.
I know. I love it. Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah.
Because I think it covers a lot. There's obviously like steps 1 through 10 of how to culturally prepare for a trip. But like blanket yourself in Christ and his love for you and his love for whoever you're going to meet, and pray for those interactions. And count it as a blessing and opportunity to have to go show Christ's love to other people. Yeah.
And don't just be a go thing. Like as soon as you walk out your door, these people, Israelites recited this twice a day. So it was the first thing before they walk out the door, and it was before they went to bed. So it was just to remind them always, love, 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 love. And out of love, like when you were dating Luke, you learned everything about him. You learned his favorite food. You learned his favorite movie. You learned his favorite music. You learned everything about him. Same goes for when you travel, when you work internationally, when you are working cross-culturally. You need to learn everything you can about these people so you can love them better.
Totally.
And when I say these people, I mean people that aren't you.
And go into it with a humility and a humble attitude. Try their language. They might laugh at you, but try it.
They always laugh.
But they appreciate it.
It's true.
You're making a mockery of yourself, but it's fine. Like you...
It just shows that you cared enough to learn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to add to this?
I would
tell us
this,
about your research.
So this book, Serving with Eyes Wide Open by David Livermore, is also a great way to step in deeper. I used a lot of his resources when I wrote my book, or I keep saying book, but my capstone project.
Well, it's not a paper, but it's not quite a book. So it's a
handbook.
Pamphlet. A handbook.
It's bigger than a pamphlet.
Yes, it's 50 pages. So,
But they're little pages. So anyways, he's a great resource. You can buy it off of Amazon.
That's Serving with Eyes Wide Open by David A. Livermore.
Yeah, I would do it. And then, I mean, if you want to go deeper, I've got a whole host of resources, but I picked these two as well.
So Anthropological Insights for Missionaries and Leading with Cultural Intelligence.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. This one you can use every single day in every workplace.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I currently work as a nurse in an emergency, and I work with people from all different countries as staff, as well as patients and patient families. And so, I mean, it comes in handy every single day.
Yeah. Good resources.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming again and imparting your wisdom on us.
I'm glad you think it's wisdom.
It is. I was just so happy to have you back here.
Feels a little weird, I'm not going to lie.
Right? Yeah. So whether you're listening to this because you're heading on a trip, which who knows when that's going to happen.
I'm getting itchy feet. I'm sure everybody is.
What's that?
I'm getting itchy feet. I'm sure everybody is.
I know. We have a team whose bags are packed.
I can imagine who they are.
Yeah. Guess later. Which is awesome, by the way, team.
Yes.
Or if you're listening to this because you just want to be more culturally aware of people you live with, there's always room to be better at that. So I don't have any websites to send anyone to or anything like that. So that is a wrap on this topic. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening to What in the World, where we seek to educate and inspire. Here at Hungry for Life, we are passionate about your group having a global impact and eradicating needless suffering. For more information, head over to our website at hungryforlife.org. And you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you may listen to podcasts. Tune in every other week for another conversation about what is happening at Hungry for Life.